hear me. I don't have to. So if you could just let me know in the chat that everything is going well, and if it's not, so let me know. I'll do my best to figure out how to fix it. So, first of all, thank you so much for being here today. I actually found the last live stream to be extremely therapeutic for me. So, for those of you who might not know, I work every single Saturday. And, oh no. Much smoother with Monday.com WorkOS. And I no longer can go to my guild meetings because they occur every Saturday, and if that's the only day I'm working, then I obviously can't be in classes at once. So last Sunday kind of made me realize that I need to do something that connects me, and so live streams seems to be going that way. So one of the things that I wanted to do today is, in addition to doing some spinning, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we make memories. So one of the things that I very, very briefly looked at in my thesis was cognitive archaeology. And so that sort of relates to, like, well, in a nutshell, what I was interested in for cognitive archaeology was sort of how skills become embedded between the bodily engagement from having done it and observing how to do things, and then how we do like memory recall in terms of how the body is working with an external tool or a device like a loom or a spindle, and kind of, it's not really grounded as much in the archaeology as things like loomites themselves. And so because it's a very expansive topic and required a lot of other types of studies, I decided to not go into it completely. But there is this connection with how we remember stuff. And so one of the things I've been working on off and on probably since 2013 is this silly weaving project. And I've talked about it on my blog, and I think I talked about it on a daily vlog several years ago. I wove this big piece, and then I wanted to dismantle it because I wove it too tightly and it didn't turn out the way I wanted, but rather than getting rid of it or throwing it away because it was made of entirely hand spun, I decided I wanted to reclaim the yarn, and I've been doing that. Now this was, I think, 6 feet long, and so this is all I have left to do, and this is the rest of the warp. So I've been doing this a while. But it got me thinking about memories, and so for those of you out there who are avid watchers of the Olympics, you'll know that it's happening right now. So back in 2014 for the Winter Olympics, I spun a lot of this warp yarn. I think my chat's a little bit delayed, sorry. Hi, Chris. Yes, I am having a good day. I slept in today. Got up at 8 a.m. But yeah, so I spun all of this warp yarn when I was watching the 2014 Winter Olympics. And because the Winter Olympics are happening again, in 2022, I was immediately reminded of this because I saw a tweet yesterday that the figure skating competition was happening. I think they were doing the team, like the team skates. So even though I don't remember all of the details from that Olympics, I am reminded that I watched those Olympics in 2014, and it's important to me that I remember these kinds of things because it kind of puts me in a historical frame of mind when I look at something like this, and it keeps me moving forward with this really tedious task of unpicking all of this weft from this project. So you can see down here all this fringe. So these are the wefts, and what I'm doing is I'm systematically picking all of the warp threads out, like one by one. So I think it was obviously before I started weaving this, but I think it was 2014, earlier in 2014, when I spun all of this weft yarn. So it's 100% merino that I added some Angelina to, so I would still call it just 100%. And this is, I think it's a 3-ply. Yes, it's a 3-ply. I would call it either a heavy lace weight or maybe it's a fingering weight yarn, but it's pretty thin. I don't know if you can actually see that with my phone camera. Maybe you can. But it's a really beautiful yarn, and I want to get it all back because I think I spun in total almost 1,000 yards of this. So obviously if it's a 3-ply, I had to spin a lot to get to that 1,000 yards. And so I want to use it for another project, and I want to use this warp for another weaving project. I don't know yet, but the combination of seeing a tweet and it being the Winter Olympics again, and just being reminded of this unweaving project, it got me thinking about how I make my spinning memories. And I wondered if you guys might be able to give me some of your stories, if you want, any spinning memories, things that you remember spinning during a specific point in your life, or your first experience spinning a particular wool that you've later come to fall in love with completely, or anything like that, would be great. I also wanted to get on with spinning this sweater yarn today because I actually haven't had any time to do any spinning with my wheel since last Sunday, if you believe it. Yeah, Crystal, as you've said, it's, 1,000 yards, that's pretty much a sweater's length, or at least a cardigan. So I might need to adjust the camera down a little bit so that you can see what I'm weaving, or spinning. There we go. Got that in frame now. Because I am streaming with my phone again today, I actually got it set up with my tripod, so I can actually move things closer if you want to see what my hands are doing while I'm doing this, or anything else. So yeah, so what are we all up to? Don't forget to oil your wheel when you start spinning. The two places I always like to oil whenever I sit down to spin for the day, unless I've already done it earlier in the day, I always like to put a little drop on the orifice, and then where the spoke, the central spoke of the drive wheel, I like to put a little oil there. And on the Kromsky, they've actually got a small opening where you can put a drop of oil right underneath where the metal connects. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's okay. I have a video on how Kromsky gets put together, and I talk about that oiling point. But because those are the two areas that seem to be the thirstiest, I like to oil them before I spin for the day. So I've gotten one full bobbin with this 100% plain white merino that I've carded, and I'm just checking the grist here to make sure that it's the same diameter and the same amount of twist. And the reason, obviously, is if you're trying to knit a sweater and you have yarn that's different gauges, then part of it just isn't going to fit as it might in another part. So always take a moment to double check, and especially since for me it's been a full 7 days since I last made this yarn, and I've been doing some supported spindling in between. So is the chat a little bit delayed still? I don't know. I occasionally see the comments coming up on the screen here, but it's delayed on my computer. So if I don't answer something immediately, just give me a minute. Oh, I also wanted to share a couple of other projects. So I posted on my local Facebook group about my services because one of the wonderful things about making stuff is it's kind of a trade or a craft. And whenever you are constrained like I am right now, I'm here still on my student visa and I'm waiting for my documents to allow me to transfer on to a different visa so I can work more. So in the interim, I'm kind of just seeking out small local projects for people. And so I was going to share what I've actually been doing for that project, because I mentioned it before, but I didn't actually show anybody. And I think it's really cute, and it emphasizes just how gorgeous hand-dyed yarn is. Like, any hand-dyed yarn is going to be gorgeous. But I think this one in particular, because it's for Pride Month, and the colors are very expressive. And then for those of you who have been sort of following me on Instagram and other social media, I actually decided to go ahead and launch a Patreon so that I can be more serious about what it is that I'm doing for the channel. So I want to have more structured educational content for 2022, and that includes things like more professional looking tutorials. So if you were a part of my channel back in like 2012 when I launched, I had some beginner tutorials for like how to make yarn with a spindle, and I was doing it with a really old webcam, and the detail is not super great. I just kind of hoped that most people who were seeking these tutorials out kind of got the idea of what a spindle looks like. And if you had a spindle and you were working with the video simultaneously, then you wouldn't be completely bewildered by what I was saying, because you would have the example in front of you. So my instruction was easy if you had the spindle, but I want to make them better. And now that I have all of the gear to do so, I can sort of upgrade that element of my videos. So that's one of the things that I am trying to do with the Patreon, is just giving you guys a little bit more in terms of like angles and editing, so that if you can't see exactly what I'm talking about, or if I'm using a different spindle than someone else is, then you can get a better sense of, from different directions, how this procedure is going. But of course it takes so much longer than just sitting in front of a webcam trying to like angle it like this, like, you know, the yarn goes up into the spindle like this, you know. So yeah, I've learned how to get the settings on my camera just right so that I can add all these features. So if you're interested in supporting me on Patreon, I put a link in the description of this video, and even if you're not really into the crafting scene all that much, it is really helpful if you are just an enthusiast. So go ahead and check that out if you'd like. So let's check up on the chat, see what you guys are up to. Okay, so yeah, no, the chat has upgraded here, so now I can see things more in real time. So, what sort of shawl are you knitting, Cheryl? Because whenever I use lace yarn for making shawls, I don't really do really lacy things. I just it's usually a lot of stockinette or garter stitch, or they're otherwise really short. There's only one shawl that I made that was full of lace stitches, and I really enjoyed it. I think it was called the Molehill shawl, which is available in Ravelry. So for those of you who are interested, you can check it out there. Mole like as in the animal. Crystal. Oh, sorry to hear about that, Crystal. I've kind of had a rough week too. I didn't get as much sleep on Friday as I wanted. We watched a Netflix movie with some friends, and they don't have to work on a Saturday, but I do. So I didn't go to bed until about 2 a.m. and I had to get up at 8 for work. So it was a very long Saturday for me. But hopefully this will improve your week somewhat, being able to just sit here and enjoy spending time with us. Yeah, Chris, this is the white yarn that I mentioned the other day. Well, I'm pretty sure this is the yarn I mentioned the other day. I don't, like, so for this weaving project that I did, right, this weaving project, this is the same yarn, and I don't know why it was so much easier for me to spin this. I spun about 1,000 yards of this 3-ply, and it only took me 67 hours to do that, which sounds like a lot, but at the same time, I was just like speeding through it. I haven't been keeping track of how long it's taken me to do this, because this was specifically time recorded for that post. But I guarantee you, this has been taking me way longer than 67 hours to spin, because I'm struggling to maintain my interest, and so that's another reason why I wanted to do this live stream today, because I need to sit down and force myself to do it, because I really, really want to get on with just making myself a sweater, so that by the time the cold weather swings back around, I'll have a sweater to wear. Just sort of the point of doing all this, to actually wear it. Hi, Lori from California. Ooh, I would love to live in California, because the weather is so different from the northern part of California versus the southern part of California. It's almost like its own little world. So Cheryl, you're making an eyelet chevron. Is it like a color work type thing, or is it just like a chevron stitch? I feel like doing color work in a lace shawl would be really challenging. So I haven't quite decided on what color to make this yarn. I know in the stream last week I mentioned like what to do if you want to boost confidence with learning to dye and dyeing something really precious like a lot of hand spun. And I said, if you are a little bit nervous, you can sort of pick that base color that you're aiming for. So let's say you want a nice rustic red color. Then if you started off with dyeing it red and then over dyeing it with a sort of glaze of brown or even black, you can kind of subdue that redness and get the color that you want. And if you sort of do dyeing in stages like this, you can have a bit more control over the end color. So let's say you dye the red, and on this particular wool, because every wool will take dye to various degrees, and that is based on things like micron size and how much reflectivity the surface of that fiber has, and whether it's a pure wool or like a wool silk blend. So if you dye it red and you're just like, oh, well, I love this color, so I'm going to leave it as is, then you have more control over that final product. But if you dye it red and you're like, I like it, but I still want to go a shade more neutral, so you might over dye it with some brown. And if you kind of step the dyeing stages like this, then you are better able to control the color. But I have no idea what color I should dye, and I keep going back and forth on this, because if you were to look at my sweater drawer, I have white, black, and then orange, red, or orange, pink, red, and purple. Those are most of my sweaters. I have one weird, like, Goodwill find sweater that's like green and gray. It's like two threads held together. And I have my hand-spun cardigans. Those are a combination of greens and blues with a little bit of brown. But I don't know. Like, do I look good in blue? Oh, Central California, the best of both. So whenever I hear people are from California, I also want to ask whether you watch Critical Role, because a lot of people, I feel like a lot of people have now become familiarized with Critical Role, even on the peripheries. It was actually, Critical Role is a D&D podcast that is spearheaded by some, well, now famous voice actors, and I think they do their show somewhere out of LA or around LA. So let me know if anyone knows what I'm talking about. I feel like there's a lot of overlap between these crafts. I went to our local board game cafe and I watched, well, I sort of like did a survey to see where we could sit down and game. And there was one table full of people gaming, and a couple people were doing other crafts. One person was knitting and another person was doing embroidery while they were playing. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. But yeah, there's like a lot of overlap between, you know, D&D fantasy type stuff and handmade arts. But yeah, maybe just exposing a lot of my nerdiness to you guys. And that's one of the wonderful things about these live streams, is you get to know a little bit more about me that I don't normally put in videos or like tutorials, because I like them to have a very specific topic. But this is the stuff I would probably talk about if you all were sitting here in my front room with me. Okay, so not color work, it's lace. Yeah, I was thinking color work and lace would be very difficult, but maybe if you had like some ombre dyed wool that you then did sort of like a fractal yarn with. That would be really pretty, because then depending on how the lace shawl worked out, you would get sort of the gradations of color. Yeah, that's a good shout, blue. I was actually thinking blue as an alternative, because I don't have a lot of blue stuff, and I did have this really beautiful blue merino sweater that accidentally got shrunk. I was in the transition stage from going from full-on acrylic sweaters to having more wool sweaters in my wardrobe. And they weren't always separated out, so my partner ended up washing and drying the sweater. So it was a tiny little child-sized sweater, which was sad. We all know that experience, right? So yeah, blue might be good, but are we thinking light blue, dark blue, sort of like a cerulean, aqua, maybe like teal, something more greenish, or purple? I do like a purplish. I like the idea of a purplish blue. Yeah, so anyone out there who likes D&D or who likes the whole collective storytelling experience, I highly recommend the show, because I absolutely love listening to it. So I went back and I reviewed some footage from me working on the warp-weighted loom a couple years ago, and I was obviously listening to one of the episodes during that, and so it was, like the whole like spinning memories thing. I remember that story arc, and I guess I was impressed at how long I had been listening to this ongoing saga of these player characters engaged with the world. But yeah, I was in the second experiment. So if you go back to my July 2020 live stream, where I was doing something for the Archaeological Outreach program here in the UK. It happens every summer. It's called the Festival of Archaeology. And so I had 2 strips of fabric that I was weaving at the same time, because I was wanting to make a direct comparison between the 2 fabrics. And so I was listening to the legend of Vox Machina, which was campaign 1 of Critical Role. And being a dungeon master myself, I've actually become so completely smitten by Matthew Mercer and his ability to storytell. And of course, being a voice actor really helps as well. So his storytelling, his knowledge of the game, the various voices, he makes characters you instantly fall in love with. So if you've ever read a book and you're like, oh, I wish this person was real because I would love to be around this person, it's kind of like that. And it's an exceptional talent to be able to make such endearing characters where it feels like they might be real. So if there are other nerdy people out there who like that sort of thing, then I can't recommend it more. And there are countless hours of content, so if you are looking for something to listen to that isn't necessarily an audiobook, but isn't, too heavy, although there are some heavy points in the stories, then that's been my go-to for the last few years. I really enjoy multitasking, but I know I would spin this faster if I wasn't yammering on quite so much. If I was setting up something for weaving, I don't know if I would be able to talk and do that at the same time. Like walking and chewing gum? No. I would not, it would not turn out well. Hi Gloria, do you know where I can get my spinning wheel fixed? Yeah, thanks, Spinners End Studio. If you... Yeah, so, if you have an issue with your wheel, normally, if it's one of those main brand wheels like Ashford or Kromsky or Modulcraft, then you might be able to get in contact with a dealer and they might be able to give you some instructions for getting that dealt with more locally. Facebook groups can sometimes have, like local spinning groups might have knowledge of or access to that type of information so that you might be able to just drive your wheel somewhere or have it picked up by somebody. What sort of wheel do you have? Because that might also help figure out what we can offer you. So Crystal. Chris. Cat's on the lap. I have shut the door on Layla because she was being a nuisance in here earlier. She has a tendency to chew on everything, and I didn't have time to put everything away before I sat down to go live because I wanted to do that on time and not confuse people by, you know, going to another stream or another stream trying to get this thing to work. So she's been banished again. I can't deal with her shenanigans. Oh, Crystal, are you asking me about that sweater that got shrunk? I don't think I have it anymore. It might have been one of those things where I got so angry about it that I just threw it away. I was less familiar with how to upcycle and how to reuse things that were destroyed in one form that could be then transformed into something else. I probably just threw it away, unfortunately. Oh yeah, okay. So Spinners End Studio has corroborated my tale about there being a big overlap between crafters who do like spinning and knitting and crochet and dyeing and also playing D&D or Dungeons and Dragons. I think also there's just been a huge revival because I remember back in 2012 that was the first iteration I saw of people on Twitch and YouTube doing these big D&D games between other sort of famous, like niche famous people. And then I think in 2015, I remember there was a bigger move to have more D&D games streamed. So there were loads of people who started like home games and then took them live. And then I think Critical Role has had the most significant impact. So they did a Kickstarter. I can't remember what year it was. It might have been 2017, but it's, as far as I know, I think it was like the most successful Kickstarter of all time. They raised $10 million. So that's pretty earth-shattering if you ask me. Karen, multitasking addict. I'm really bad about it. I sometimes multitask to the point of just being completely exhausted, where the only thing I can do is wrap myself up in a blanket and do nothing. So I need to have more options than full on and full off. It's one of the challenges I think a lot of us face, where we want to continue being productive and doing things that we enjoy doing, and spinning and weaving and knitting, all that stuff, those are sort of like working hobbies, and they're not always totally relaxing. And if that's something that you do a lot of, like I've done for years, it makes it hard to kind of find the middle ground between the two. Yeah, definitely, Gloria, try out Facebook. You can just do a Google search and say um, fibers and spinning group, or like spinning and weaving group Facebook, and put Connecticut or your city. You might find something through Google that way, or else you can do it on Facebook. But yeah, there's probably bound to be something. There's loads of Facebook groups I didn't even think would exist, but do. And the people who are on them are usually quite helpful, so give them a shout maybe. Sorry, just keeping up with the chat here. So Spinner's End has talked about Alan Dewey, or Bobbin Boy, who's a master wood turner, and his wife Melissa Ellison Dewey. They specialize in antiques. Oh, that's really helpful information. That's cool to know. They're in North Carolina, and they go to a lot of fiber fairs around the U.S. So hopefully you'll be able to find something, but it looks like North Carolina is near enough to your neck of the woods. And if they travel, hopefully this year there will be more fiber shows. I know, I think part of the reason why I end up destroying certain projects is I get so frustrated and I can't calm down because I'm just enraged by how much I've spent on something, and now it's completely ruined and I can't use it for that purpose anymore. Thinking laterally is something I probably only started doing since about 2015 or so. So my most recent knitting bag I made out of an upcycled cashmere sweater. Oh, it was 2014 when I did it. I actually have this video. It's a daily vlog where I talk about this upcycled sweater bag that is now my knitting bag that I've obviously had since then. And so what's really funny about that, so for those of you who have watched my channel for a long time, you know that I kind of experimented with other types of content besides spinning. And I had a couple of upcycle videos in my daily vlogs that people just hate. Like, so many dislikes on these videos. And so I was like, okay, so this is not what my audience prefers to see, so I'll just kind of work on these projects by myself and not really make it a public thing, because this was before doing craft vlogs and how popular they've become in the last few years. But I probably could have had a couple of really cute little bags, because something similar happened to a pair of my wool socks. They got washed and they felted horribly. Oh yeah, Dwayne Johnson and Joe Manganiello. They are pretty awesome characters. So for those of you who maybe watched True Blood, Joe Manganiello's in that. He's also been in some other stuff that I can't think of offhand. But when he played as a special guest with Vox Machina, I'm still getting chills thinking about what he managed to do. Like, you instantly now remember this character in the story. And he's also got his the basement of his house is all outfitted with all this really cool D&D stuff and things mounted on the wall. I think he actually has this giant beholder, which is like a giant floating eyeball with tentacles. It's actually really terrifying if you're up against it as a player. Big old nerd. I really love that you guys are helping each other out in the chat. So hopefully we'll get some wheel issues sorted out. You know, these are our friends, right? And we want them to be healthy and living their best lives, and you know, they want to make yarn just as much as we want to make yarn. Am I the only crazy person who has named her wheels? Doubtful. Oh no, Gloria, you dropped your wheel? And now it can't stand? Oof. Poor thing. So I've done that with this wheel, and I can't imagine how you must have felt when that happened. So, because I move around a lot, I have to be able to dismantle my entire wheel so I can pack it up for storage or shipping. And so one of the things you can do is when you assemble it, you can actually glue the legs into the base. Or not, depending. And it's got 3 legs. So there's 1 in the back and 2 in the front, and it's the front left leg. It always wants to fall out. So I can't pick up my wheel with one hand, because I would just pick it up from the central support here, because that leg will fall out, and when that falls out, the whole bottom falls down, and you can't really use the wheel if the treadles are broken. So that happened to me once, and it fell on hardwood. Sorry, it was in Korea. It was basically hardwood over concrete. So there was nothing in between. And I feel like the saving grace was just because that wood had enough give where the concrete would have caused it to break. Yeah, Alcide. Oh man, I read, I think, the first 7 Suzanne, what was it? What was her name? The author of the True Blood stories. Charlaine Harris. So I read, it was like a set of 7 books or something that I read. And when the HBO show came out, I was like, ooh. You can't blame Sookie, right? And of course, finding out that, you know, the actor who plays Alcide is super nerdy makes it even better. Yeah, that was so long ago. So long ago. You name your vehicles spinners. Yeah, so this wheel I named Elizabeth, or Beth for short, because it's so regal that it needed a super special name. I also have an Ashford traditional, and I've named that Boudica because I got it when I was here in the UK, and so studying the Iron Age period, and Boudica supposedly existed in the late Iron Age period. It seemed to make sense, so I don't know if many people with an Ashford traditional are calling it Boudica, because it doesn't seem like a rough and tumble, you know, major leader type wheel, because it looks pretty streamlined, but maybe it, you know, maybe there's more story there. Ask for traditional and naming it Boudica. Does anyone call their wheel or their spindle a male name, I wonder? Or is it sort of like when naming things like a nation is a motherland, or cars are female names? I'm just kind of wondering, because I do name a lot of stuff. Our vacuum cleaner is named about Malcolm. And Layla, our cat, doesn't like Malcolm the vacuum cleaner. And it's just funnier to to talk like this because it's almost like coded speech. Layla doesn't like Malcolm. But anyone who knows is like, who's Layla and who's Malcolm? So I get the pleasure of being able to explain this really funny thing about me, the quirk. Aww. Alina, your fiber equipment has been named by your son. That's so sweet. Hopefully they're good names. Oh no. All of these fiber tools in the chat being sort of assaulted by random events sounds so devastating. I'm glad that we've gotten them all fixed and sorted out, and Gloria's on her way to getting her wheel sorted out as well. In fact, when I was reorganizing this room, I have all of the loom weights that I used for my weaving experiments with the warp-weighted loom. Oh, this is one of the small ones. And I actually dropped it on the treadle for the Ashford, and I was happy that it didn't break. Because it's sort of all in this little spot together, so you can kind of see some of my storage over here. So the stuff that isn't stored, that's my wool, and all the stuff that I have for expedite is put into totes, just to keep everything separate, so I can see what I have. You know, you can also just trial out names. And the name that you remember, or the name that you like to go to first, is probably the name for your wheel or your other tools. It's almost like it was meant to be. Like the wheel has spoken to you, and if it wants to be called Elizabeth, you remember and call it Elizabeth. I don't know. Just having fun with it. Yeah, I used to drive a truck. It was, well, I had a friend who called him a Power Ranger, because that's what it looked like. What was it? Anyway, it was one of those smaller trucks, and I used to call it Old Bessie. I don't know why. I think maybe because it was white, and I was thinking of, like a pure white cow. And cows are named Bessie. My dad actually always had trucks, so he had an '86 Silverado with, complete with running boards and everything. And sometimes when my dad would get home from work, he would let me kind of climb up and ride in the back down the 2 streets to our house. Stuff that you could do in the 80s and feel relatively safe doing that maybe wasn't the safest. My dad was always very responsible with me. Don't need to worry about that. I'm glad that we could help, Gloria. Want to get you back up and running, creating and doing fun stuff. I actually lived here in the UK for a while without any wheel, and I think I kind of went stir crazy because I did have some of my spindles, but I didn't really spin too much, and I also didn't knit too much. I was also really busy with school and things, but I realized that I can't live without my wheel, and I can't live without this one. So wherever I go, it goes. Yeah, I think semis are very masculine to me, and you know, maybe this is just how my brain perceives that vocation. My uncle used to be a truck driver when I was little, so I kind of associate, like, my dad had a truck, my uncle was a truck driver, so I kind of associate trucks with maleness. So maybe that's part of the reason why. And it's not just because I associate this with femaleness that I would call it that. I think it's because of the intricacy of the wheel. I was inspired to give it a royal name for that reason. But at the end of the day, it's sort of what I felt really called to me. Hi, Wanda. There's some rambly bits in the beginning. You didn't miss a whole lot. Let's see here. Okay, Deborah has you've named your wheel George. That's pretty cool. Like king, like a King George, or just George. I actually had a female hamster named George. I had two hamsters when I was 16, and I named them Bob and George because I thought it was funny to name girl hamsters boy names, because that's just what you do when you're 16. Spinner's End had a 78 Dodge truck that was named Jethro in a maroon color. Faded to maroon. Oh, Gloria, we'll get you all fixed up with your wheel, and then you can join us the next time. I actually wanted to share really quickly this project that I've been doing for a local person. So in the UK, as far as I know, February is Pride Month, and I'm making these little sweaters to go around hand carved ducks. And I mentioned this in the last live stream, but I actually wanted to show what they look like because they're super duper cute. So this is the yarn that I'm using. So I'm hoping you can see this all right. This is, I think, Malibu Nights, and I have one more skein of it. So if they want to do more of these in the future, then there's some yarn for it. So I've done two different styles. So I did just a basic garter stitch. And then this one, oh, it's also a garter stitch. One of these, yeah, so this is a seed stitch. So it's actually a little bit wider. So you might be able to see the stitches a little bit there. Yeah, can you hear her meowing? So the idea is it's going to be a little duck figure. That is about, it's got a small neck, but it's got like a big bulbous head and a big bulbous body. And so it's going to be a bit like that when it's all done. If you've seen like little teddy bears with a handmade scarf. Just basically what these are. And I have some that are knitted for the larger version. So these are a little bit wider and thicker. And so I love the way that these colors turned out. So they're very wild and extremely vibrant and expressive. But you can see how that would look on a larger duck. So that would go around its neck, and then this would kind of sit on its chest. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing for this, and I think it's great that over the course of my experience knitting, I hadn't really considered what we do as a trade, but it really is. So I'm doing this project for somebody, and then just darning in people's socks and mitts with the appropriate yarn so that it can be washable. That's another project I'm working on. And it took me a while to realize this, but there's a lot of people out there who don't know how to make these repairs that I obviously do because I work with it all the time. And that kind of expertise is expertise. And I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves that that's the case, because there are loads of people out there who don't do what we do and don't have an interest in doing what we do, but still appreciate this type of work. So, I mean, it's not taught formally in school. You can't get a degree in knitting formally, which would be cool if you could. So, yeah, I think this has sort of exposed me to a whole world out there I hadn't really considered for my skills. I also wanted to share this other spinning project that I've been doing. So if you followed me on Instagram recently, or if you have stopped by my Patreon, you will have seen some of my supported spindle photos. So what I'm doing with this is 100% Cormo. This is actually some wool that I processed back in 2011. It was one of my very first fleeces. Actually, it was my first full fleece that I processed by hand, but it wasn't the first fleece I processed. And so I got this all carted up before I put it into storage in 2015, before I came to the UK. And then it's just been sitting in my stash since it arrived in the UK back in 2020. So I thought I should do something with it, and I realized that this is one of the supported spindle yarns that I made probably back in 2015? No, 2014. I was learning how to use a supported spindle, and so I found this wool was really perfect for it. So what I'm trying to do now is match this yarn. And it's not an easy task, especially since what I'm doing here isn't a traditional two-ply that I would make with my wheel. So I'm going to explain this in the tutorial video that's coming out next week. But if you wanted to get more information about my supported spindling plans, and I'm probably going to end up doing a few videos with it, then feel free to check out Patreon. And now I'm pretty sure you can't see this, so I'm going to have to lower this just a tad so that you can see a sort of like a little sneak peek preview being here today. Can you see this? Well, you can see the top part. Yeah, those I really love those little scarves. So I got this, oh goodness. As soon as I'm putting myself on display, I'm messing up. So, I initially got this spindle because I wanted to do tutorials with it, and because I had never used it, I wanted to have enough time working with it in order to feel confident enough to teach somebody. So I talked a little bit about this with Evie in the interview video that came out a few days ago. You can't just learn a tool in a few days. It takes time. And if you're going to be teaching somebody else like proper techniques, I didn't develop a good sense of proper technique until months after picking up this tool. But now that I've been working on it for a few years, I'm more confident in using it. So essentially, I'm drafting against the twist, and this is from Mirkwood Fiber Arts, I believe. So they have an Etsy shop. It's a US Etsy shop, and this one is called Smaug, part of the Hobbit series of spindles. I have traveled the world with it. I went to Korea, to the States, back to the UK. I even take it with me on trips. So because it's fairly small, it fits very conveniently. Obviously, a wheel doesn't compact enough for me to travel with it around the UK. And because I can sit here and do it on a tabletop, I've done more of this out in public. So this is what I would call like a modern style, and it was customized for what I wanted it to be. So I picked a stone to put in it. Instead of having a point, it's sort of a rounded tip with a stone in the middle. Hopefully you can see that. And you can't actually see because I've covered it up, but the whirl goes up to here. So I've just, when I've put on the cop, or wound on the cop, I've ended up covering up some of the whirl. So it's actually two different woods here. But anyway, so I'm basically drafting against the twist here. So I'm twirling this in the spinning bowl until it gets enough twist, and then I can draft against it. And coordinating this took a while. There are some people out there, obviously, who are much faster at this than me. So if anyone follows the Peahen, she is always posting videos of her spindle spun yarns, like supported spindle spun yarns. My studies did not take me to Korea. So I left the States basically because it was really difficult to afford living expenses. This was before the Affordable Care Act, and I was caught between needing to pay back student loans and needing to pay health insurance and being unable to afford both. And realizing that even though I was working full-time and operating Exploit Died, I still wasn't making enough money to live. So I was basically working a full-time job and a full part-time business job. And it wasn't enough. And my partner was working too. So it was ridiculous trying to survive. And so at the time, it made more sense to just go to South Korea, where the cost of living was much lower, and the pay scale for being a teacher was much higher. So I went there initially to teach English, and then for a little while I I worked as an independent fiber consultant for a yarn shop in the States while I was living in Korea. And my final year in Korea, I decided I wanted to go back to school, so I started focusing more on doing some studies to kind of gear myself up for finishing my degree. So I had an MSc in museum studies when I went to Korea, and then when I left Korea to come to the UK, I got an MA in archaeology, and then stayed on for the PhD in archaeology. So if you watch some of those videos from basically the end of 2014 and into 2015, I was more interested in archaeological and ethnographic methods of textile production, textile research. So if you want to see a very early episode of me talking about the warp weighted loom, I have a video on my channel about that. It's actually an interesting perspective because there was a lot that I hadn't been exposed to, because when you finish school you don't have access to a university library anymore. And I just got access to any kind of research documents I could for free. And so I kind of did the best I could with what I had, but now that I've had access to all that research, it's really changed my perspective of experimental archaeology as it relates to textile studies. And that's actually one of the things that I'm hoping to round out more in 2022 this year. Because I realize there's a lot of people out there who want to engage more with the stuff, but getting access to certain kinds of details or materials is difficult. And so I'm going to try and find a way to increase accessibility based on your interest as well. Having a brain melt. How do you wind a single onto your hand to apply it? So you're talking about Andean applying. So let's see if I can. If you're still with us, Deborah. So basically, you want to wind around your hand back and forth like this, so that when you pull this off, you have a little bracelet for plying. So it would be like that. Hopefully you saw that and it makes sense. So basically you just need to wrap around one of your fingers and then back the other way and wrap around that same finger. So you can't go around in one circle. That won't work. But if you wrap around one way this way and then around the hand this way to wrap, then when you pull it off your hand, you'll be able to ply. Okay, just catching up on the comments. I'm not being too serious, am I? I actually really love learning new hobbies and trying out new hobbies too. You never know what your next favorite thing is going to be. So just checking in on everybody. Did you find today relaxing? Do you think we should do more of these live streams? Because I like the idea of doing a monthly live stream, but again, because I don't have access to just going to the guild meetings because they happen on Saturdays and I work Saturdays, I might just want something more relaxed but kind of similar to what you would get at a guild. And I also know that some people don't have access to a local guild, or because of COVID restrictions, you might not be able to meet up. So I know we've had some months where we have had to cancel because of the restrictions here in the UK. Oh, goodness. Stubborn piece of wool went and dragged away. Yeah, that's actually a good point, Spinner. So, you were saying that sometimes university libraries can act as public libraries, and that's very true. When I was first done with my undergraduate, I had access to the university library because they give you like a grace period afterwards. And then because I worked for the state archaeologist, which was connected to the university, I was able to continue maintaining that access. But you also have to be present in order to get access to materials, and sometimes, depending on the library, you get access to books, but nothing electronic. And there's so much more stuff that comes out in electronic format in the form of journal articles that are otherwise behind a paywall. And if you wanted to subscribe to it, sometimes it's really expensive to do that. If there's like 4 or 5 journals you want to subscribe to, that could be like, I don't know, $300-400 a year. That's a lot of money. And no guarantee that all of those journals are going to be putting out information that you specifically are interested in. And if you just buy individual articles, they could be, $30. That's also a lot. So there are some trade-offs. So like the archaeological textiles newsletter, which is associated with the Center for Textile Research in Denmark, in Copenhagen, that is free access. If you want, you can actually purchase copies. If you want a paper copy that's all printed nicely, you can do that. Or otherwise, you can just download the articles for free. And I think they have articles spanning back into the early 1990s. And a lot of that stuff there is really important cutting edge textile research as well. So for those of you who are interested, you might want to check out that resource. Yeah, I actually have a lot of my stuff on academia, so I don't often link it below, but if you did a Google search for my name, it might come up if you search Jennifer Beamer Academia. You know what I look like. My list of publications and papers and stuff will be posted there. I need to update it, but you can also just message me and I could send you a link to the documentary, just the document itself, because I've so far published everything open access, so it's freely available. Another really good place is Xarc. So if you are more interested in kind of like the experimental research, there's loads of stuff there freely available. So I published one article on Xarc back in 2020 about textiles in the classroom because they're a really great teaching tool. Let's see here. Yeah, and Sally Pointer also has stuff. I mentioned Sally Pointer in my interview with Evie that came out a few days ago. She focuses on prehistory more generally, so if you want stuff that's in the Paleolithic or Neolithic or Bronze Age, I don't know of any other YouTuber who has similar content. So if you're looking for something that's much older than, say, my period, definitely check out her stuff. She also has some really great videos on things like foraging and non-weaving stuff, so things like making mats and baskets and cordage and other little useful textile or flexible fabric type stuff that doesn't normally get categorized as cloth in that traditional way it's defined. I'm glad other people are spinning alongside me. It's exactly like what it's what it's like going to a guild meeting. Well, I'm glad that you think my videos are awesome, spinners. Yeah, she's also got some videos doing stuff with a warp-weighted loom. Another reason why I want to finish this yarn is so that I can get some handspun made for another warp-weighted loom experiment. So in my latest video on that subject, I was doing more on the thinner side of yarn gauges. So it was 0.3 millimeters, which I would categorize as probably a fingering weight yarn. It's actually probably about this diameter. That's what I used in that warp-weighted loom experiment. But there's also differences to be explored with a heavier gauge yarn. So I would like to do some experiments with thicker yarns. But having a good single that's thick enough and spun to the right twist angle, I'm pretty much guaranteed to have to make it hand spun, because getting it commercial is a lot more difficult. So for those of you who don't know, a lot of Iron Age textile fragments that we have from the mines at Hallstatt are significantly high twist, or like 40 to 50%, 40 to 50 degrees. And a lot of commercial yarns tend to be spun with a lower twist. So depending on the company, they could be like 20% or 30%. So I'd rather just spin it myself. And I have also a lot more control over the fiber content. So if I want it to be more accurate, I could use a primitive breed, which I probably will end up using a primitive breed for that experiment. So just trying to expand the realm of possibility, because I don't think that Iron Age people were just making one kind of fabric. I think they were making a whole variety of fabrics, and they maybe didn't need to change around their loom weights a lot. So I think these are very multi-purpose, and so they just probably figured out how to do all the setup and all the spinning so that they didn't need to have a lot of loom weights. Basically just enough for normal use. So yeah, we'll see about those project details probably in April, maybe May, I don't know. It takes so long to make yarn. So yeah, if you build it, they will come. Spinners has also said there are other open source places besides academia, and being a librarian, she knows quite a lot about it. So yeah, if you want to maybe find out some more information, ask spinners. Those are just the ones that I know off the top of my head. Academia, ResearchGate are some good places. Sometimes the proceedings from the Prehistoric Society are available for free. Cambridge sometimes has some open source or open access documents. Not all of these platforms have freely available documents, but sometimes they do. Sometimes you can find books available. So I think Creativity in the Bronze Age, which came out in, I think, 2018 or 19. That was through Cambridge University Press. I think that one is freely available. You might need an institutional login, so there might be some things to look at there. But maybe Spinners will put some more information below to help us out, because I might need that too, since I'm done with my PhD and I have to take my library books back. I'm not going to have access to all this cutting edge research like I've had for the last 6 years. Let's see here. I have not sorted out my issue with the weave, but I have an interesting idea that I'm going to try for the next video. So maybe I will put together a project plan and maybe circulate that on my Patreon. So if there are people who want to get access to my project plans, that would be a fun thing to sort of make more into a community project. Because initially I was supposed to go to Belgium to do a lot of these experiments, and I wasn't able to last year. I was held up at Heathrow, so I had to turn around and come back. And I ended up wasting a lot of money with that whole endeavor. So, getting some plans sorted and some advice from some of you guys, because I know some of you, like Deborah, you've done some reenactment stuff, right? Or maybe some SCA, because I think I follow you on Instagram, and so there might be some extra information I can include in this setup, because part of this is just me figuring out what the problem is and the range of techniques that could be available, and then obviously going back to the archaeological evidence to see whether this would have been probable, because we don't really have evidence of technique. We just have these tools, and we have to make inferences based on the ways that these can be manipulated with the setup on the loom. And I was an invited guest. Well, let me say this again. I'm getting really excited and ahead of myself here. So I was an invited talk for a French conference on Monday last week, and there was one paper that I was listening to that was completely in French, and my French is very rusty and a little bit difficult to follow, but they were using a warp-weighted loom and having similar kinds of problems. So one of the things that I'm keen to do is make some connections with those people, and maybe get some more thoughts on various techniques that could have been employed. But they also did some techniques that I have seen other researchers do that didn't have quite the same setup, and so there were like various amounts of success with those setups. So I would like to explore that idea as well. So maybe I'll be making a lot of hand spun for the warp-weighted loom this year. Just gotta keep it in good shape. Let's see here. Okay, Chris, you were saying something about a Swedish woman who creates ancient wooden utility items with rustic tools, and that the videos are exquisite and informative. No, I have not heard of them. So if you could post those below in a link. Yeah, definitely post in the comments below, because I would love to know as well. Oh yeah, if you have a local library, in fact, the local library to me is 2 blocks away. So that's actually a really good point. But also the university library is just down the street from me. So it's quite possible I can get better access to stuff. But also so you guys know that these resources still exist, that not everything has to be online to be accessible. So check out your local libraries, because They also want and need your support, especially for those that live in more rural areas that may not have great internet access. They're still going to want to go to local libraries. So the more we support local libraries, the greater impact that we can have on free education. All you need is a library card to go to a library. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna wrap this up for me today. I hope I have given you some fun things to think about while you've been busy crafting. I did make some progress on my yarn. I made 2 little bunches here, and I made a little progress on my supported spindle yarn, which I'm hoping it's going to turn out like this yarn, because I really love the way this looks. And I only have this one little skein to go off of, so I'm hoping that I can spin all this. I definitely have enough to make a sweater if I use it all. So hopefully I'll also be able to use this that I spun back in 2014. So that whole like spinning memories thing, that theme for today is being translated as well. I know that you guys know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so if you want to give me feedback about these live streams, so you think maybe a different time or a different day, I might be able to be a little bit more flexible, although bear in mind I am in the UK, so I'm trying to find that balance between doing it at an hour where I still have time to relax afterwards, and then not doing it so early that my fellow Americans can't join in. So I still like to maintain the relationships with people who followed me initially in the States. I'm sorry, any of my viewers who might be from Australia. It's very difficult to find that balance between them all. So anyway, have a wonderful Sunday. Enjoy yourself, relax, do all those things that you enjoy doing. And I hope you have enjoyed this hour and a half reprieve with me. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new here and you like what I'm doing, please subscribe. I have lots of other content on my channel that I've put out over the last 8 years. And this year I'm going to be putting out roughly 1 video a week. So please check out some of my other socials if you want to get some sneak peek previews of what's coming up next. And I will see you in the next video. So, bye everyone!